So, the backbone, the foundation of any society is the base, the bottom line, the most poverty stricken, least educated, most diseased, injury prone. The people that are at the very, very bottom, how the society treats them is how that society functions or not. Because those people, whether we like it or not, those people constitute the foundation of society. The way that those people operate affects every single tier above them. In the same way that if you're building a house and you fuck up the basement or the foundation, that entire thing, it doesn't matter how good you build the rest of it. It doesn't matter if you build the rest of the shit out of diamonds, it's going to collapse because that foundation is what's holding the whole thing up. That foundation is the most important part of society. If that shit fails, everybody dies. Everybody fails. Because guess what? Those people have friends and family, and they can get access to guns. They can get access to all kinds of things. They can just riot unarmed. There's all kinds of, those are the people that are cleaning our bathrooms, that are planting our trees, that are cleaning up the roads. Those are the people that are doing all the most basic shit that we need to survive. They're driving the trucks, all that stuff. And they depend, it's very much like any other ecosystem. It's like plankton. Like plankton feeds directly off the sun. So everything eats something. Plankton eats the sunlight. The plankton then get eaten by little fish, that get eaten by medium-sized fish, that get eaten by big fish, that get eaten by us, right? And and that's how it works. So if those plankton die, then we die because those plankton are what's feeding everything in that food chain. Goes back to the plankton. And it's like that in every ecosystem. We have to take care of our most impoverished. If those people don't have homes, this entire society crumbles. And most people don't see it that way. They don't see why, all these problems happen. People shooting each other and shit. And they're thinking, well, that's not even related because those people that are committing mass shootings and those people that are causing all these problems and terrorists and stuff, those are highly educated people, or they're, at the very least, they're in the middle class. They're not usually the poorest. So what does that have to do with that? What it does is it feeds this culture that creates mass shooters. When we treat homeless people like shit, when we don't have really any form of welfare, it tells people that they're only good for what they do. And that echoes throughout every part of society. And it's what drives people insane. And it's what makes people not trust each other. And it's what makes us compete in a dog-eat-dog kind of a world with that mentality that you're only good for what you do, for your utility. And if you don't have a utility, if you don't have a function, if you don't produce anything, then you're not worth shit. You're not even a fucking human, blah, blah, blah. That kind of culture is what drives people crazy enough to just run around and kill people because it's soul destroying. That's the thing that makes us all suck at things. Even if we're not impoverished, it still plagues us. And even if it doesn't directly affect us, it will indirectly. Because like I said, those people have friends and family. They have bullies too. And they have principals and they have all kinds of interconnected things going on. And that's what people tend to get distracted by. Well, they were bullied or their home life wasn't so great or they had autism or something like that. Or they had too easy access to guns or something. But in reality, what caused the person to want to do that? Because all of us have access to guns. Pretty much everybody gets bullied at some point. All of us have some kind of a mental problem at some point in our lives, if we're really honest. Now, we might not have broken down completely, but we could have. Had things been pushed hard enough, maybe we would have snapped or broken or had some kind of crazy fucking breakdown, It's just that just so happened to not happen to us. And so then we didn't have that happen. So we think we're all safe and secure. But in reality, we're really just one crazy event away from a meltdown. If it's a crazy enough event, or if there's enough of them in a row, just by happenstance, then we could get knocked off our high horse too. And so it's the culture that's the problem ultimately, because it's the culture that is what justifies and creates, these ideas in people's heads about, I want to go kill people because all I'm good for is what I can do and I can't do anything. And so therefore I feel like I'm worthless, but I know that's not really true. So I'm going to fight against that, but I can't, come up with anything better. So I'm just going to destroy what is making me feel like shit. And so that's what people do, is they get to a point where they feel like they can't do anything to solve the situation. It usually happens because, they had something happen to them early on and then they just didn't recover. And it was like something that most people would have probably recovered from, but they just didn't have the resources, or they didn't have the coping mechanisms or something, and they missed it. And because they missed that, then they missed the next one, and then they missed the next one. And then after a while, they don't even get them anymore. They don't even get resources anymore because they fell so far fucking down that the only people that can help them are, either police or somebody in the Justice Department, or somebody that's in a mental institution, or like a psychologist or something like that, or a social worker. And if it's not one of those three, then there's really no one that can help them. Not even their own friends and family. At some point, the person gets to such a bad state that no one except one of those three people can help them. Well, the reason they get into that state is because they have some kind of mentality. Everybody has a mentality, and our mentalities are what makes us do whatever we do and not do what we don't do. And if our mentality degrades over time, then eventually we get to a point where we don't have anything guiding us anymore, and it just doesn't mean anything. And it's like that mentality of utilitarianism, where people are just all interchangeable, and it's just about what they do and their function and what the result or the effect of them being there is. And while that does matter, that's not the most important thing. The most important thing is cause, because it's the cause that causes the effect. So if the effect is valuable, then the cause is even more so, because without the cause, you don't get the effect. So I believe the cause for the mass shootings and all that is the culture, and I believe the culture is utilitarian, and I believe utilitarianism is soul-destroying because it doesn't value the person for that person's sake intrinsically. It values them only extrinsically for what they can do for someone else. And I believe it misses the mark, because we don't make decisions ultimately based off effect. If we did, then we'd be calculators, we'd be robots. We'd just be spreadsheets and statistical data at that point. What we make our decisions on are ethical values and causes, movements, positions that we take. And we defend those, and we try to grow them and get people to jump on board with them, because they are what cause the effects that can drive people insane. But they can also, if the effect is good, or if the person takes the effect in a good way, they can learn from it and it can actually motivate them. So it isn't the effect that caused it, because all of us go through some negativity at some point, but not all of us end up destroying something because of it. The only time that we ever really destroy things is when we run out of ideas of what to do, when we're out of ideas, when we're out of resources, when we're out of help. That's when we turn on each other and we just say, fuck it, because no one's helping me. It's always like that. Everybody that I've looked into, when they go on these mass shooting rampages and shit, they all say the same thing, is that like, nobody cares, nobody helped me, all I am is such and such because I can't do such and such. There's always the same frustration in like, I can't do anything about this and it's unbearable kind of a thing. And it's like, well, we're all living in the same world. So if what you're describing is unbearable to you, then that makes sense for you. but it doesn't necessarily mean that anybody else would find that kind of thing, the bullying or whatever it is, to be so unbearable that the only way that you could do anything about it is to kill people. Everybody gets bullied. Not everybody kills because of it. But, when you do get bullied, you can understand why, because you want to beat someone's ass over it. It sucks, right? But then there's several options in front of you. You could retaliate, and maybe you do, but you don't do it with a gun. You do it with your fucking fist. You just say, oh, no, you know what? Fuck you, and defend yourself and fucking, handle it. And that's okay, as long as you don't pull a knife or a gun or a weapon. If the other person, it's always about equivalence. If the person threw a punch at you, then yeah, you're justified in throwing one back. But you are not justified in escalating. You can either equate or, better yet, de-escalate would be the ideal. But you can never escalate once you get into a conflict. If you escalate during a conflict, the only justifiable solution to that escalation is to destroy the one that escalated it. So you put a mark on your back permanently and you can't come back from it. So that's why you don't ever escalate. But people will escalate and that's when verbal taunting and bullying becomes a gunfight. Is the person will cheat and they will use an escalation in violence if they feel like that is the only way or the best way of resolving the situation. And that's the question. What is it that leads someone to that? What is it that leads to someone to believe that the best way of dealing with this is to kill people? And then if we solve that, then we can solve this problem. So I think what that is the person feels like a failure. None of these people that commit mass shootings are successful. None of them are popular. None of them are good at anything. They suck ass at stuff. They don't know what the fuck they're doing. They don't know why they're alive. They don't know what to believe in. They will latch on to anything that gets thrown at them. And they develop delusions very easily because they don't know what they're doing. Nobody's ever guided them in the right spot, or they refused when someone did, or something, and they missed the mark. So these situations happen. And again, I'm thinking about these mass shootings because I'm thinking about building my own society. I want to avoid that. And that's a problem here. So how would I solve it there? So what I would do is what I call accomplishment therapy. And it's very simple. You use Kaizen, which is you find the smallest discernible difference towards success and away from failure. So you're going to have to identify what is it that person, or I guess they would have to identify what it is that they want to do, that they want to succeed in. They're going to pick something. I don't care if it's at random, but you pick something that is not destructive. And then you start working on that the smallest bit at a time. I'm not going to overload that person. They've been through enough already, whatever, but they can do the smallest possible thing. They can take one smallest, tiniest little baby step towards success, and then you just build on that. And every day, regularly, over and over and over and over, you don't let them go until they fucking get all the way to the end of that accomplishment. And the ultimate accomplishment is to get them into an independent state where they don't feel that negativity at all, and they don't have any reason to because they're successful. And that's all it is you get that person and you turn them into a success, and they will not go out and go on a rampage. It sounds crazy because it's like, but you want to give that person more power? Yeah, I do, because that's why they're going out killing people, is because they feel like they don't have any power. And if we don't help them, then they're right. So we have to give them power. Someone has to give them enough power to be able to at least function on their fucking own. Half of these people live with their parents. That's another weird thing I've noticed about the mass shooters, is that even if they're really old, like in their fucking 20s, 30s, way past due to get out of mommy's and daddy's house, they're still living at mommy's and daddy's, or they're living at grandma's or an aunt or they're mooching off their wife or something like that, where they're not taking care of themselves. Those are the ones that go out and commit mass shootings, not rich millionaires, not even middle-class people that go work at a grocery store and maybe they're a manager, you know, and they're just above the guy that stocks the shelves, right? Those are not the mass shooters. It's the guy that's stocking the shelves. It's the guy that can't even stock the shelves, you know, shit like that. They're unsuccessful. And some of them are really smart. Adam Lanza was really smart. If you actually read or listen to what he says, Adam Lanza is really smart, but he wasn't successful because he wasn't driven toward anything. He was trying to drive away from things. And a lot of it, and I don't remember if she says it herself, but a lot of people either say it or it gets implied that his mom enabled the fuck out of him because she would go through all of these hoops to try to, quote, make him feel like he's a normal kid. Even though she, unquote, even though she knew that he wasn't normal, and even though she knew he wasn't normal, and she would just still go through all these hoops because she didn't want him to have to confront with that. Well, that's teaching him to run away from problems, not to deal with them. It doesn't teach him how to deal with problems. And so then he's not empowered. And so because he's not empowered, then he just thinks society is slavery. Look at what mom is doing. Mom is the biggest, most important part of my life because I'm living with mom. So mom makes all these decisions and mom builds this world for me. Well, that must be, you know, what else is he going to do? That must be an accurate worldview for the real world. And the only other thing he could do is just rebel against his own mom, at which point, why does he even have a mom? So if he wants any nurturing or any mothering from his own mother at all, then he has to take it in the form that she gives it, and she gives it in a disempowering way that doesn't teach him how to be empowered, but in fact teaches him that he shouldn't be in power, that he shouldn't be trusted with that power, and that therefore maybe no one should. And so then he takes that and he internalizes it and he says, no one deserves to have to deal with society the way that it's built, where you have to go to work and you have to pay your bills and you have to drive your car and you have to get a car wash and you have to get your car insurance and you have to pay the phone bill and you have to have a nice phone and you have to have all of this stuff and nice clothes and blah, blah, blah. The consumerism and all that stuff. And it's not natural and it's not healthy. But where he goes wrong is the conclusion that there's no solution except to destroy society itself. And that's where he misses the mark, because I disagree with anarcho-primitivism. I understand it. I've read a little bit of Rousseau. I understand the concept in general. I'm not a scholar, but I understand the basic concept is, well, if it's not natural, then it's not going to feel right. And then we're not going to, it shouldn't even be done if it isn't natural. The natural world is, the ideal world is basically the concept. Well, the problem with that is there are species of plants that live in the wild that do better in the laboratory than they do in the wild. And there are animals who do the same thing. And I would argue that humans are one of those. So society, in my opinion, is good because it increases the longevity of our lifespan. If we were in nature, we would die in our 30s. But if we're in a well-to-do society and we're even meagerly successful in it, then we get to live to be about 80. And I think that's a pretty big fucking difference. That's almost triple. So I think that society triples our longevity, and therefore it triples in, or nearly so, in value in comparison to nature. I can't find any reason that I should die sooner and with brutal conditions, because I've lived on the streets. I wasn't in a cushy little posh room. I lived on the fucking streets, and I lived on the streets for 8 years. And I can tell you that's as close to the wild as you can get. Because you can do anything. You can shit in your fucking pants. You can shit right on the fucking sidewalk. And it's like your dog. It's, people are just going to walk past you. They might yell at you the same way they would at a dog, but they're not going to really do much else. You basically have the same amount of freedom as a stray dog if you're a homeless bum. And it operates according to the same kinds of rules. You get put in the fucking kennel at night with all these other assholes that act like animals around you. So even if you go in as a good person, you're coming out as a fucking animal because you're surrounded by other animals. So you have to deal with some shit when you're homeless. And when you go through that shit, then you realize nature's not the best. When people just do whatever they feel like fucking doing just naturally, it's not the best. When they rip ass right in the fucking bed, right in your face, right next to you, that's not the best. It's natural, but it's not the best. When somebody just shits in their fucking pants and doesn't clean it up because they don't feel like cleaning it, that's natural, but it's not helpful. It's not the best. So we have to develop a culture that stops using utilitarianism as to, you're only as good as what you do, which is the thing that I believe Adam Lanza and other people that agree with that anarcho-primitivist Rousseauian view that nature is best and society itself is a disease and a corruption. Those who take that view have a point against the current system, because the current society that we live in is utilitarian, and it does not value you unless you have utility. It only values you extrinsically for what you can do for someone else's benefit, not your own intrinsic value and worth that's inalienable and can't be taken from you and doesn't have anything to do with what you've done or not done, but your value as a human being. That is disregarded in today's society, and that is deplorable. But that doesn't mean that society itself is deplorable, because that isn't necessary. It only ends up becoming necessary when the people at the top have this utilitarian view of the people at the bottom, where they have to harden themselves emotionally, they say, because they have deplorable working conditions. And the vast difference between the owner's worth and the lower people's value is so vast that they can't really view each other as people, or at least not as equals. And they don't give each other, because I've been on the bottom and I've heard, all the rhetoric. Poor people hate rich people, and rich people hate poor people. And the reason is because the differences are so vast that they can't even look at each other as equals anymore. But they are. They're equal in the fact that they're both human. But they don't see that. They see the differences in the effects. And, well, this person has a whole bunch of money and this person doesn't have any. And they're both pissed off at the other one for the way that they are. And it's like, well, don't you guys realize that this isn't about money? Our intrinsic value is intrinsically valuable. And the person that is poor should be able to feel fulfillment, even if they can't afford it. They should be able to feel fulfilled. Now, they might not get the best treatment, but they should get better treatment. I do agree with that. And what could be better is, again, if our society offered free housing, albeit Spartan, okay, very minimalistic, not asking for luxury condominiums, but basic housing for basic hygienic needs, right? And to allow homeless people to have carts in buildings, at least in designated buildings like homeless shelters. The fact that they can't bring their carts with them is so like people don't get this. I didn't know this until I became homeless, but having a cart and not having a cart is night and day. It's the difference between royalty and peasantry. If you're a peasant homeless, there's echelons inside the homeless community. At the very bottom, you don't have a cart. You don't have shit. The only thing that you have is what you can carry in your hands and in your pockets. That's the lowest state because you don't have enough to even function. You can't wipe your ass if you have to take a shit. There's nowhere to go. You can't wipe your ass either. You know, you're going to have to go all the way back to the homeless shelter in order to take a shit. So you basically then have to live at the homeless shelter if you don't have anything. So if you have to live at your homeless shelter, then you can't go out and get a job because you're too busy waiting on chow. You don't have the ability to go and do this job interview all the way across fucking town. You don't have any transportation. You can't buy a bus ticket, etc. So all these problems happen when you don't have a cart. If you do have a cart, then you can pile it with extra food. You could put extra clothing in there so that you don't have to wear the same clothes every day. You can put your shoes in there. You can put all kinds of things in there. You can put drinks, whatever, hygiene stuff, whatever. You know, you can put all of the shit that you need in your cart. Blankets, tent, all that stuff. If you don't, then you have to carry it on your back, and that's like the middle. So you have at the very bottom of the homeless hierarchy, there's people that don't have anything. And then at the middle, there's people who have a backpack and they don't have a cart, but they have a backpack, right? That's the middle. And then at the top, you have the cart. If you have a cart, then you're almost free, because if you have a cart, and I'm watching somebody push one right now. It's so ironic. If you have a cart, then you're almost free, because you can put all your shit in the cart and you don't have to lug it on your fucking back. So you can carry enough stuff that it isn't just things that you need every day. It's stuff that you could use every week. And that really opens things up, because then you can put your tent in there. You don't have to lug that around. If you only have a backpack, you can't really have a tent. So you have to stay at the shelter. But if you have a cart, then you can put the tent in the cart, and then you can stay outside the shelter. You don't have to go to the shelter anymore. You can just stay in your tent. And that gives you way more free time, because then you don't have to worry about the buses that take you over to the shelter, because that takes 12 hours out of your fucking day. Because you got to sit there and you got to wait for the bus to get there. You can't leave because you don't know when they're going to get there. If you do leave and you miss it, then you are sleeping on the street with no tent, and that sucks. But if you have a cart, then you don't have to worry about any of that shit. But the problem with having a cart is you can't bring it into the homeless shelter. So it's only good for permanent ones that have their own tent and make their money doing day laboring jobs. They don't need the shelter, and that's why they can still have their cart. And they're at the top because they are making money, and they have enough money to afford a tent, which they can then put in their cart. And again, you know, when you go out and you go to your day labor job, you can't bring your cart there, so they get their shit stolen unless they can lock it up or they have a friend watch it or something like that. Luckily for me, I was able to carry just barely enough to make it through a day, and the rest of the shit I would just buy. And that's how I made it through. And I didn't have a cart then. But if I did have a cart, it would have been way easier on me, because I wouldn't have to lug 50, 60 pounds on my back in a backpack. And everywhere I fucking go, I can't even take the shit off in the chow hall, because somebody will rifle through it or they'll steal it, and nobody's going to do anything. The staff doesn't do anything about stolen property. Not a fucking thing. They have it on camera. They know who did it, and they won't do anything about it. And it's crazy, but that's just the way that is, which again would be avoided if people could bring their carts in the building. Then they can just put all their shit in their cart, and then, you know, put a piece of plywood over the top of it or something, and you can keep an easy eye on it, something like that. You could even lock the fucking thing. Carts are versatile. You could do all kinds of things with carts, but they won't let you bring that into the building. So all these other fucking problems pile on, where you have to wear this backpack, heavy ass backpack, all the damn time, and you cannot put it down, because if you put that down, it's going to get taken. Someone's going to just swipe it up, and they know they can, because they can do it right in front of the staff, and they won't do anything about it, because nobody has private property in the shelter. Your property, quote unquote, is whatever you've got your hands on. If you don't have your hand on it, it ain't yours no more, and someone will take it. And I mean, that's the type of shit that I'm saying that will break your fucking soul, because it's like, I earned all this shit, or I found it at least. And then you're going to just take it. You know how long it took to fucking get that? And half these fuckers don't even need it. They just throw it away, or they use it once and then get rid of it on impulse. And those are the ones that get to run everything, is the gang members and shit like that. Because, like I said, the staff doesn't bother doing anything. So all those problems, like I said, could get fixed with just having a cart, because you could, instead of having to wear the backpack, well, now they're going to beat you up. Well, you just have your fucking cart and you lock it, and now they know they can't get anything in there. So they get used to that idea. They realize it's not going to do any good, because just beating you up isn't going to necessitate that they get access to that cart. You know, it's not psychologically the same thing as just taking the shit that somebody's wearing right then and there. Having to rifle through somebody's crap, get the fucking key, go to the cart, unlock it, and then grab the shit takes way more time than just punching somebody and taking their shit. So if somebody's impulsive, which is what would lead them to do that in the first place, they won't bother going through your cart, but they will bother going through you. So that's how that works. And like I said, all of that can be fixed if they just made some minor tweaks. Let them bring their carts in the building. Let them have their own private property. So if someone does steal someone's shit on camera, actually do something about it, because that is a actual fucking crime that you can actually do something about. You know, what else do you have security for other than that? Secure people's private property. That's their shit. It might not be worth anything to you, but it's worth something to the homeless people that have to have that. You know, toothbrushes matter. They're not, oh, it's only worth 10 cents. But when you don't have a toothbrush, it's worth a hell of a lot more than 10 cents. It sucks. So, like I said, minor tweaks. Right now, you have to pay. Even as a homeless person, you have to pay for razor blades, toothbrushes, floss, all that type of thing. They'll give you free toothpaste, at least. But you have to have your own toothbrush. So there's just stuff like that. And it's like, so then you still have to have a dime. Where are you going to get a dime? You got to find it. You got to just wander around on the street until you find a dime. And almost no one uses change anymore, so good luck finding it. You know? But you have to pay for that type of shit. And if you don't have a dime to your name, literally, then you can't brush your teeth. So it doesn't do you very much good to make it worth 10 cents if you don't have 10 cents to buy it. It sounds like it's, oh, well, that's basically free, but it isn't actually free. I still have to pay you to get it. So I still have to find this change somewhere. So, you know, it's not absolutely terrible. It only takes a few days, maybe a week or two to find 10 cents. But it does take a few days, sometimes weeks, before you find a dime. So, yeah, it's pretty fucking rough. So anyway, all of that is to say that the differences would not be so fucking huge if we offered some basic services to the homeless, like free housing, free hygiene, and then they do offer free food right now, but they like I said, don't offer you free hygiene, and it's also really difficult to take a shower. You know, you can go to St. Francis is the only place that I know of that offers them. It's the only place in town that you can go to get a shower. And they only have 4. So if those are being used, then you have to sit there and wait. And they only do shower time from some time to some other time. And it's a pretty large window, but you have a lot of things that you have to do while you're homeless. You know, you got to go to these various places and get food. So, you know, the things that would really help would be like a bagged lunch rather than feeding the person right then and there, because they can feed their friends. They can save it for later, which is paramount. Being able to save food for later is such a big deal, because if you can't save any food for later on, then you have to eat at the chow hall every single meal, which means you can't leave the shelter to go to get a job, to go take care of whatever business that you need to take care of, You can't do any of it because you have to sit there and wait for them to feed you again because you can't get food any other way. So I had to go to Catholic Outreach to get my bagged food. And that way I could save it in case I missed a meal, in case I had to go get a job interview done, in case I had to go take care of some business out in town. I could do that and skip the meal because you have to walk everywhere. So it takes hours. I would do a bagged lunch, and then that way I wouldn't starve. And if I get hungry later on at night, I can still eat it. It's nice to be able to eat when you get hungry. Even if, you've already eaten dinner, you could still get hungry later on. So then you've got your bagged lunch. So it's nice to have those things. They don't do that at the shelter. They give you an unlimited number of meals, but you have to take it on a plate, and you can't. The rules are that you aren't supposed to save it for later. You can get away with it, but if they catch you, then you can get in trouble. In some cases, you can get kicked out and not allowed back in, which, again, like I said, would then mean you would starve, at which point you have to go eat out of a garbage can or just starve. Or you could beg and hopefully get some money from somebody to go to 7-Eleven and get a fucking taquito or some shit or a sandwich. But yeah, it's very rough having to deal with that kind of thing. So what I would do is I would have a dispenser, because they do this with Narcan, for example. They'll give you free Narcan if you go to a vending machine out by the hospital, and you don't have to pay for it. You just, I forget what you have to do to get it. You have to somehow identify yourself so they can make sure that they don't give you too many, right? Because they don't want you taking the entire vending machine's stock yourself, because they got to give it to other people too. So they limit it based off who it is. You identify yourself, and then it will give you one per week, I think it is, something like that. And so we just do the same thing. You scan just to ID yourself, and then it will dispense your daily ration. And it would be great if it was a full day's worth of food and drinks in one packet. That'd be really ideal. And just do it that way. And instead of having all of this crap where you have to go at certain times and you have to wait in the fucking line and you have to go, it just makes the person feel like they're a piece of cattle, because you have to do all this bureaucratic shit, and none of it makes any sense. Like the way they search you even is so stupid. They'll take your scissors, they'll take your razor blades to shave your face with, but yet somebody gets stabbed in there every other fucking month. How is that possible? It's not helping anyone. It's not keeping anyone safe by taking all this random shit that you claim could be used as a weapon when it clearly isn't a weapon. But yet these people are sneaking in shivs and knives and all kinds of shit, and you're not doing anything about that. So what good is it that I give you my razor blade that I used to shave my fucking face with so that you can feel like I'm not going to be a threat when somebody got stabbed there last month and you were still taking my razors and it still didn't help, didn't save that dude from getting stabbed? So it's just ridiculous. All of that shit could get avoided if they just replaced the entire thing with a vending machine. And as far as where you sleep, they should have free housing somewhere. And like I say, jail cell, okay, would be better than having to sleep on the fucking street, because there's violence on the street. No matter where you go, you're going to have to deal with it somewhere at some time. Someone is going to just go fucking nuts, and it's going to happen near you because you're the outcast. You're stuck out on the fringes of society where those people are. So yeah, there's going to be weird shit. And then if you can, what was the other problem? If you could just do those two things, if we could just do those two things, then that would help so many people in society, not just the homeless, but the people that they're connected with and the community in general, because it will get them off the street and into a job so they can be productive instead of just sitting around doing nothing and paying drug dealers what someone else put in their cup that day. You know,